Do you know the difference between a scene header versus an action line? Do you get a headache trying to figure out the difference between OS, OC, and maybe even VO? Then this is the video for you. Hey, if you're new to the channel, my name is Paul from ScreenWritingScribe. I'm a screenwriter who's been writing screenplays for about the last 10 years. Now, my channel mainly focuses on screenwriting software and how to use it, but I also do a lot of general screenwriting videos as well, including interviews, screenwriters covering screenplay 101 topics like what we're going to talk about today. Now, if you're new to the craft, this will be a great primer for you to get you going on writing screenplays. So after this video, you should be able to start writing right away on a screenplay to begin to show people what that blockbuster that you're going to create is going to look like. Now, the first thing I'd like to cover today is how do we start a scene. Now, this first part is what we call a scene header. And it can also be referred to as a slug line, but it always reminds me of snails, and I think they can be a little slimy. So scene header. This is where we flesh out where we're going to start the scene at. It's made up of at least 3 different parts. Now, the first part is either an INT, an EXT, or an INT/EXT. Now, these abbreviations are not some weird Morse code. In fact, they're a very helpful reference for the readers of the script because they tell us where the scene takes place. Now, for thinking INT, that stands for interior. So I bet you can guess where EXT stands for. If you guessed exterior or outside, you're correct. Now, the funny one is INT/EXT, which means the scene takes place inside as well as outside. Now, example of this would be having the camera sort of follow a character from the inside of the house to the outside into their yard. So the next piece of the slug line, slug line or scene header is the place. So are we outside in space? Are we inside in a nice restaurant? On the page, it would look like this. So from this piece of scene header, we would know that the scene would take place in some type of parking lot. This leads us to the next part of the scene header, which is it a time of day or when the scene happens? It doesn't really have to be during day or night cycles. It can be stuff like continuous or a few months later or something like that. But just to give us sort of root us in where in time we are at. Now, one pro tip for you new screenwriters out there, don't be too specific with the time of day. You see, if you say the scene needs to be done at twilight or dawn, this will make the scene a lot harder to film because there's only a brief amount of time to film scenes like this. And if they have to do several retakes, this could actually take the scene, instead of taking a day or 2 to film, it could take several days, maybe a week or several weeks to do, simply because you wrote dawn or twilight. And if it isn't really that important to the scene, then you can probably just say day, and it's going to help with the film making process. So just keep that in mind as you think about the time when this particular scene takes place. Now, with that being said, though, if there is a scene in here that's pivotal, that it's filmed at dawn, then put it in the script. If it's vital to the story, make it so in the script, but just be mindful of, again, it might take people a little longer to film this based on the time frames that you are using for your script. So the next thing we're going to learn about is the action lines. Now, these are the lines that generally happen right after the scene heading. They tell us what's going on in the scene, hence the action. What's the action? Now, here's a scene from the first Avenger movies to help us see what that action lines may look like. Now, 2 things to note about the action line. First, we want to be very economical with our words. We need to say a lot, but without going overboard with our words. You see, the description of the actions are not as detailed as they would be in a novel. Most action pieces within your script are normally going to be about 5 lines long at times. Now, note, this is not a hard and fast rule. Just in general, you want to sort of have a lot of open space in your script. If you have too much action and not enough dialogue, people are going to say, well, are you writing a script or are you just writing a novel? The second thing to look at this Avengers action text is to notice that there's a lot of capitalization. There's names and there's also features or traits. In some movies, it'll actually be accessories like clothing, but they're capitalized. So what's the point of that? Now, it's pretty standard when you introduce a character in a script that the first time you see them, that their name is capitalized to raise the attention that, hey, this is the first time that we're seeing this character. So you'll see in the script as well, too, that there's also items or traits that are capitalized. So what is that about? So the reason behind that is it's drawing attention to these characters. So let's say there's this particular type of sunglasses that you want to make sure that the audience sees and visualizes and understands this is part of the character is and who they are, and this is important for the plot point. Then you can type that in as all caps, and that's going to remind people, hey, these glasses, these sunglasses are important, or this blue dress is important. Or in this particular case, they talked about what traits are important. Hence, we see that Agent Maria is sexy, fierce, and determined. Now, a pro tip for you. You don't want to be too descriptive with the physical descriptions of each character unless it's important to the story, because the studio is going to want to cast whoever they want to cast. And if you have somebody that looks like Tom Cruise, you put that in description, this character looks like Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise does not want to be associated with the script at all, then people are less likely to buy it, because this is who the reader has in mind as to who should be in the script. So it's good to be not too descriptive of the character. If there's certain character traits that you need to be pulled up, make sure to pull them up. But just be reminded that if you're too specific about a character or an actor that you want to play that particular character and that the actor's not interested, it might be a strike against selling this type of script. Now, having just looked at our characters, let's look at how we handle dialogue. You'll notice that the character is in caps and their dialogue displays right below their name. This seems fairly easy. It is until we start adding parentheticals and other types of abbreviations that we talked about earlier. So what is a parenthetical, you might ask? Well, a parenthetical is where there is a direction in a set of parentheses right before the dialogue. It looks like this on the page. This stuff in parentheticals helps the actor or reader understand what is being said, what the emotion is. Now, before you start using them in every single piece of dialogue, I would ask you to refrain from doing that. Why? Well, you're going to have somebody called an actor reading this, and they need to do their job, right? You need to allow them to act. Now, if we did a good job of creating characters, the actors or actresses should know how to say that particular line. However, there are times where the line needs to be said in a way that isn't clear by the character's actions or dialogues, and you guess it, this is where you put a parenthetical. So an example of this is if you had two friends that went out to a restaurant in the middle of the day in a hot Las Vegas setting, and the person says, "This is hot." Now, are they referring to the food? Are they referring to the restaurant? Maybe they're referring to a person of the opposite sex or anything along the lines. What is that reference to? There, it would be helpful to have a parenthetical. There's a lot of different options, and the reader might not know exactly what they're talking about. What about the rest of this alphabet soup? I mean, what really is OS? Well, OS means off screen. It's placed in a different area than our parenthetical. It's normally right after the character's name in the script. Now, you might be asking, well, where would you use off screen? Now, if a character is responding from a different room to the one the scene is at, let's say that the scene that we're writing about is in the bathroom, and then a character talks from the bedroom, they're off screen, and they're coming from, their voice is being carried off the screen, so they're in a different part. Now, OC is off camera, which is normally somebody who's just not in the shot, but is in the same area that the scene is taking place in. So a good example of this is, let's say you're working in the kitchen, you have somebody focused on washing dishes in the sink, and then you hear a voice, and all they basically are basically right behind the character. Maybe they're working at the stove or setting the table, which is in the same room as them. Then they're basically off camera. Now, this is very popular when you want to do a sort of a reveal. So if a character is sort of like in the darkness and they suddenly come forward, they're off camera. In that they're coming forward, they're being revealed. Again, this is, if you want to do a type of reveal, this is a great way to do it. Finally, there's VO, which means voiceover. Now, voiceover actors tend not to be on screen, and the voiceover helps sort of inform the audience of what's going on at that particular point in time. A lot of times you see this with montages and stuff like that. Now, believe it or not, we've covered a lot of the basis already, but there are a couple more things that turn up sparingly, like transitions and cuts. An example of this would be like a jump cut. The reason we do stuff like this is to help with pacing and tone. And I don't tell people to sort of worry about the camera angles and stuff. That's more for a shooting script, but if you're just writing a regular script, this is stuff that you don't really need to worry about. And for the most part, I wouldn't be worrying about these transitions and cuts. Again, like I said, if you want to help with pacing and tone, you can do it. It's great if for an action scene, if you want to do a lot of cuts to make it more pulsating, more action-oriented, sort of more chaotic. And it might be a little different if you want to really have a dramatic scene, you really want to fade out on that particular scene in order to really cause people to think about that particular moment, that poignant moment that's happening. Again, we don't use them too much. Like a fine chef, we use them more like seasoning. Now, there are more advanced elements as well, but these are the ones we've been talking about are going to get you through the majority of your first script, especially that first draft. I'll have another video later on talking about more advanced elements of screenwriting. And to make it even easier for you, I'm actually going to link two videos, one for a paid version of a software and one for a free screenwriting software that you can use these things that we just got talking about and get them right in action. These two videos will help you get started in these. Again, Kit Scenarist is totally free. You can start that or fade in. It does have a free option and also a paid option as well.